supporters of voter ID, I challenge you right now regarding this story here. Many people who support voter ID say that there's no possible way that this can be trying to give the election to Mitt Romney, but yet, like I said, I reported on DMVs being shut down in larger cities, and being forced to go 10 miles out where public transportation rarely ever goes, or and where they'll have to basically produce the documents and whatever and spend a lot of money if their license is expired in order to get a voter ID. And also how it's making it harder, how a lot of legislatures are making it harder to restore the citizens' right to vote, as well as proof citizenship laws, like in Kansas. In fact, the woman, the last voter ID one I did, I was talking about a Democrat from Kansas, not Missouri. But this is what this is from Ari Berman at The Nation, the Nation newspaper. Ohio GOP admits early voting cutbacks are racially motivated. Earlier this month, I reported how Ohio Republicans were limiting early voting hours in Democratic counties while expanding them on nights and weekends in Republican counties. In response to public outcry, Ohio Secretary of State John Husted intervened in favor of limiting early voting hours in Democratic counties, issuing a statewide directive mandating uniform early voting hours in all 88 of Ohio counties. Husted kept early voting hours from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. on weekdays from October 2nd to 19th, and broadened hours from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. from October 2nd to November 2nd. But he refused to expand early voting hours beyond 7 p.m. during the week or weekends 3 days prior to the election, which is being challenged in court by the Obama campaign, when it's most convenient for many working Ohioans to vote. Rather than expanding early hours across the state, Husted has limited them for everybody. Voter suppression for all. Montgomery County, Ohio, which include Dayton, is now at the center of the early voting fight. Obama won Montgomery County by 6% in 2008. On two separate occasions, December 28th, 2011 and August 6, 2012, the four-member County Board of Elections unanimously approved expanding weekday and weekend early voting hours, but in a meeting on August 17th, the two Republicans on the board switched their position and opposed expanding early voting hours. With the committee deadlocked between Democratic and Republican members, Husted broke the tie in favor of the GOP like he's done in Cleveland, Columbus, Akron, and Toledo. Yet before breaking the tie, Husted ordered board members Tom Ritchie Sr. and Dennis Lieberman to hold a new meeting and rescind their votes in favor of early voting. When they refused, arguing that Husted's directive did not apply to weekend voting, Husted suspended them from the County Board of Elections. A third of the 28,000 in-person early voters in Montgomery County in 2008 voted on the weekend. There was no reason in the world for him to do what he did other than suppressing others' rights to vote, Ritchie, who served on the Board of Elections since 1995, told me. At a hearing in Columbus today, Husted's office will decide whether Ritchie and Lieberman will be permanently suspended. They should be able to fight that in court. I fully expect that me and my fellow board members will be removed, says Ritchie. A ruling is expected later this week. If that's the case, Ritchie and Lieberman plan to appeal their suit suspension to the Ohio Supreme Court. He also believed that Husted's orders that the board hold a second meeting on August 18th violated Ohio's sunshine laws, which requires a government body give a person 24-hour notice to the media and general public in advance of a public meeting. Lynn McCoy, president of Ohio Association of Elected Officials, says she was not consulted about Husted's directive, despite his claim that he sought the input of local election officials before making his decision, and was surprised by the suspension of Ritchie and Lieberman. I don't see why Husted got into this. You voted, now you're suspended kind of thing, McCoy says. The Secretary of State is trying to send a message that he wasn't going to tolerate any kind of extended hours. Husted's drastic action marks a dark day for democracy in Ohio. Historically, the Montgomery County Board of Elections has been a very well-run and widely viewed as one of the best board of elections in the state, says Ellis Jacobs, an attorney with the nonpartisan Miami Valley Voter Protection Coalition. The Board of Elections planned ahead to maximize voter access to the polls. Now they're being punished by the Secretary of the State for doing their job so well. So why do Ohio Republicans suddenly feel so strongly about limiting early voting hours in the Democratic counties? Franklin County GOP Chair Doug Price gave a surprisingly blunt answer to the Columbus Dispatch on Sunday. I guess I really feel we shouldn't contort the voting process to accommodate the urban red African-American turnout voter machine. Price is not a rogue operative, but chairman of the Republican Party in Ohio's second largest county and a close advisor to Ohio Governor John Kasich. Like Pennsylvania House Leader Mike Turzai, who said the state's voter ID is going to allow Governor Romney to win the state of Pennsylvania, Price said publicly what many Republicans believe privately, that keeping voter turnout down among Obama supporters is the best way for the GOP in 2012 to win the election. That's why since the 2012 election, Republicans have devoted so much energy to voter suppression efforts, like limiting hours, restricting voter registration drives, passing voter ID laws, disenfranchising ex-felons, and purging the voter rolls. Cutbacks to early voting disproportionately disenfranchise African-American voters in Ohio. African Americans comprise 21% of the populations in Franklin and Montgomery counties and 28% in Cleveland, Cuyahoga County, but accounted for 31%, 52%, and 56% of early voters in the respective counties in 2008. Nearly half of early voting in Franklin County in 2008 did so on nights or weekends. Now, it will be harder for voters across Ohio, particularly in the most populous, heavily Democratic cities, to find a convenient time to vote before Election Day in order to avoid the long lines that plagued the state in 2004 and may have cost John Kerry the election. In the hours and days now eliminated by legislative and Secretary of State restrictions, an estimated 197,000 early in-person votes were cast, constituting a 3.4% of all voters cast statewide in 2008, according to a new report by Norman Robbins, research director for Northeast Ohio Voter Advocates. This is very significant in Ohio, where major elections have been decided by a 2% margin of victory. Republicans were for reforms like early voting until Democrats started using them. It has just so happened that 2008 was the first time that early voting had been used in large numbers to mobilize African American and Latino voters. Federal court ruled on Thursday that early voting cutbacks in Florida, where blacks outnumber whites by 2-1 among early voters in 2008, violated the Voter Rights Act. Republicans are doing everything in their power to make sure 2012 is not a repeat of 2008. And you think voter suppression is fiction?